So in today's episode, I'm going to be reacting to and analyzing an interview done with Phoebe Bridgers for MTV News. And Phoebe Bridgers is an indie artist from LA, and I'm super excited for this one because I'm a huge fan of her songwriting. I'm going to be listening to the interview, looking for maybe bits of insight that we can gain from this interview about songwriting, her creative process, and just about the music industry in general. And also just to see whatever's of interest. So just keep watching my face and see how I react to this interview. Let's get to it.
How has music helped you to process some of your traumatic experiences?
Some people who misunderstand sad music are like even my mom, she doesn't want to hear anything sad in the car, you know? She's like, why would you want to kind of soak in that feeling? Honestly, it's kind of like trauma representation. It's like, when I read a book that's super dark or something, there's like a weight lifted because it's just someone that you look up to laying all this out that you relate to.
Okay, so I love that. I like how she describes it as trauma representation. So as someone that is a songwriter and someone who also writes music about trauma that I've gone through, I think that this is super, super important. That there's music and that there's art out there for those that have experienced trauma, and that we have a place to sort of express ourselves, and also maybe it helps people who don't have trauma to understand us just a little bit better. And she's right in that when something is super dark or super sad, if you've not gone through the kind of experiences that maybe this art or this song is describing, it might seem a little bit difficult to listen to, or you don't necessarily want to experience something sad. But if you yourself have gone through trauma or, difficult life experiences, then listening to sad music actually can feel happy. It can feel like you feel understood, you feel a connection because you have experienced something similar. And in a way, like, dark things can be very therapeutic and healing, and yeah, it is trauma representation, and I just love that, and I can really relate to that.
Let's start at the beginning. Tell me about where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
I was raised in Pasadena, which is like a suburb of LA for people who don't know. My parents are like huge music fans. They like listened to tons of music when I was growing up, and I feel like I owe the entirety of my music taste at an early age to them. I have a little brother too, who's like a visual artist. My dad's in construction. My mom has had a string of odd jobs, but then now is doing stand-up comedy for fun. I usually get roasted pretty hard if I go to see one of her shows.
What is she saying in her stand-up?
It's like, most of it is like too humiliating.
Okay, so what I think is interesting is I'm starting to notice a pattern in quite a few songwriters, is that they've grown up in a family where music was pretty important to their family. And what's interesting about that is it's not necessarily that their parents were even musicians or artists. It's just that there was a lot of music in the home, around the home, in their community, and it was important to them. And I think that it's really, really crucial that children have access to music and see music as an important part of life, and also like as a place to express yourself and potentially to have a career. And I think that for me personally, if I didn't have music, I'm not sure where I would be or what I'd be doing, because music was 100% a place for me to escape, for me to sort of express some difficult life experiences, but also just a place to just have fun and, be creative. I don't know. I wonder how much of a role it really plays on musicians today and songwriters today that their parents listened to so much music and sort of surrounded them with music. I think it at least kind of set the seed for a potential songwriter to bloom. I know there's probably other things that intersects, which kind of creates a songwriter, but yeah, I think that's a huge part of it.
And then she'd pick me up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. She was just so supportive.
After high school, you know, those crusty bars led you somehow to Berkeley, which is amazing, but you decided not to go.
I didn't really want to go to school because I'm bad at school, but I was already kind of playing shows and just felt like, why would I go to more music school? But my mom was like, look, totally fair, whatever, but like you need to apply to one school. Just one. And so I chose Berklee School of Music because I'm a fan of tons of people who went there. We went to like a little LA orientation and she was basically like, this is rad, but it's also expensive. And yeah, you're like, this would be you learning how to do what you're doing.
When do you get to that moment where you finally get what many would call your big break?
It's funny, I feel like I've had hundreds of big breaks. Like every little thing felt like a big break to me. You know, like selling 100 tickets in London felt like my big break. And then going on tour where I wasn't really making any money, but I got to play with the Violent Femmes, that felt like my big break. Getting signed to Dead Oceans, again, like every minute. And then last year, it's like Grammys and, you know, somebody I think is cool tweets about me or something. Like everything feels like, you know, a new level to me, which is awesome.
I really like that. I think Phoebe is pretty humble and she goes into the music world with this sort of attitude that's quite relaxed and I think is quite admirable. And I think that's partially why fans love her so much and why she's so well respected. Because she's thankful and she's grateful for every little sort of success that she gains within the music industry. And I think it's a great way to look at your music career because maybe it might not seem like such a big deal to get into a small magazine or to be posted on a small music blog or, you know, to get on a playlist. But these little things, they're little wins, and we should sort of see them for what they are. They are successes, and we should be grateful because you never know, like, where that little step could take you. Maybe someone just happens to read it who is from a record label, or, you know, that kind of thing. So don't put down your little successes. You deserve every little one. It's all part of the process.
At what point did you begin really solidifying your solo journey?
I didn't understand the concept of not playing every 5 seconds. And more than anything, I feel like I just made tons of friends from those shows. It's how I met my drummer, Marshall, who, you know, we write tons of songs together. And Harrison, my guitar player, we just met through tons of mutual friends, and I feel like they contributed so much to the way that I sound. I didn't really know what I was doing before I met them, so I feel like it was mostly just about getting out there and meeting people.
When did Stranger in the Alps come into the picture?
My friend Andy Oliphant was kind of like helping me out a lot. He's a music guy, and he introduced me to Tony Berg, who's this producer. And I had like convinced myself I didn't need a producer. I was like, I'm just gonna make my record by myself on like a 4-track tape machine. And then I met Tony and we hung out for like 9 hours. We just kind of like nerded out about music. And then we spent 2 years, you know, he worked on it for free. He just was like, I'm sure we'll get paid at some point, basically. But I was getting like random tours and stuff that I always wanted to go on. And then I'd come back and record for a couple weeks, go out, tour for a couple weeks, come back, record for a couple weeks. But I think I really needed that time. Like, I think that I wrote my favorite songs for that record while I was on tour. And now that's like my favorite way to work.
What is it about your process that works for you, and how'd you kind of find that?
Well, I totally found it on accident. I think when I was making my first record, I thought I was totally ready. I thought I had all the songs. But then I think I got a little bit snowblind. Like, it was just kind of a soft folk record with cool sounds and stuff. Like, there was nothing very exciting about my record. I just was like, it needs something else. And I wrote my song Motion Sickness as like this ballad, and we recorded it like that. And then Tony was like, this needs drums and it needs to, you know, be like a real song. We can't have this be a fake song. So I think what's nice about it is just being able to listen and then try again. I feel like that's our process for the most part, is making something and then scrapping all of it and doing something else.
How often do you
Okay, so a couple things here. I like when she's talking about how she initially wanted to make her record alone. She didn't want to have a producer, she just wanted to do it herself. But she realized that actually having a producer could really help her sound, and she wasn't afraid to do it. I mean, I can't say for sure, but I like how she didn't turn it down, because something I sort of see with some songwriters and some musicians is that they want to 100% do it themselves. They don't want anyone's help, which I get it, because I've been there and I get the feeling of wanting to be completely independent. But I think there's something, again, about collaboration and about connecting different talents and skills together to get that amazing sound that I'm not sure maybe Phoebe could have gotten if she didn't have the producer. So yeah, don't be afraid of collaboration, and there could be like some really cool ideas you can gain that you maybe wouldn't have if you hadn't had a producer or maybe another songwriter you're collaborating with. And then the other part of her process, which I really like, is how she initially wrote Motion Sickness to be a ballad. And I've listened to it. It's like, it sounds pretty as a ballad. It's a beautiful song. But what's cool is that they listen to it and they realize, like, no, this needs to be like kind of like a rock song, and they did it. And I think the studio version, like the finished version of Motion Sickness, is a bop. Like that is honestly one of my favorite songs from Phoebe, at least. And why I like that they changed it is because I think sometimes people get very stuck in an idea and they don't want to move away from that idea. But sometimes we can look at a song that we've written and notice that if we completely switched it around or flipped it or did something completely different with it, the song might be even better. You know, them taking Motion Sickness from a ballad to like a rock song, like making it faster and more vibrant, it was 100% the right decision. And I think that part of the process that we need to sort of incorporate is sort of taking the time to really listen to what we've made and not be afraid to scrap it and sort of start again or completely rework an idea. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think that's totally cool. So, yeah, kudos to them for doing that. It's not easy to do, to sort of give up your song baby like that.
Again, writing your songs as ballads and then filling in the blanks later?
Like almost 100% of the time. And I think it's because I write by myself. I also like live in a place where one of my neighbors yelled through my window for me to shut up once. So I write really quietly and then I bring it into the studio, and that's almost like getting to write it again. So instead of writing 50 songs, I feel like I write 50 versions of the same song until it's the one I want.
Where do you draw inspiration from?
I just kind of focus on lyrics.
I can relate. I like the idea that she's writing them super quietly, you know, like doesn't want roommates or like neighbors to hear her singing or guitar because it will bother them. And I think I tend to write my songs 100% every time as a ballad as well. I don't know if it's just because I listen to a lot of like ballad type songs, but I always start really slow and like soft, and then later I might think about how I can change the tempo or, you know, the instrumentation, the arrangement to make it more of like a pop song or more, you know, whatever it is. And it's interesting how she talks about she writes one song, but in the end, she's sort of written like 50 versions of that song. And I think that is, you might think, oh, well, you should just take the first song idea and go with that and don't change anything. But it can be really useful to have like a process like that where you write the song and then you come up with different ideas and different versions and until you find the one that works the best and the one you like the most. So don't be afraid to sort of experiment with your ideas and your songs. Definitely useful tip right there.
Works first, that's for mostly personal experience, but then production-wise, I will listen to kind of as much as possible, and then I'll make like a playlist of little ideas and stuff.
When you get into songs that are as deeply personal as motion sickness, are you ever worried or concerned with being that honest, being that transparent? Is that a difficult process, or is it more of a cathartic process?
It is cathartic, and I think the way that I comfort myself through writing it is just like, you don't have to show this to anybody. But then by the time I record, I'm usually already over it, or I'm excited to put it into the world. But that's kind of how I trick my brain into doing it. And I have yet to edit myself for the public. I feel like if I didn't write about personal stuff, I would be robbing myself of the experience of talking to fans with mirrored experiences. It's so fun to play a show or joke about something dark and then have somebody come up to you and you're laughing about trauma, basically. You know, you're laughing about something or a shared experience and you're like, man, I'm so glad I said that because otherwise I wouldn't have had that conversation.
Punisher comes out June 18th, 2020.
Okay, so one thing I really, really, really love about Phoebe Bridgers is the fact that she writes mainly autobiographically. And as a songwriter as well, I find I get this advice given to me a lot, where people will say, oh, don't make it too personal. Don't make it about you. Don't make it about your life. Don't tell stories about your experiences. And I wonder why it is that people don't want me to do that. And I love that Phoebe does write autobiographically, because if she hadn't written those songs and she hadn't shared it with the world, I think that is a huge loss. It's sort of like it would have made herself smaller in the sense that her expressing, let's say, trauma or a dark experience, it's giving validation to her experience, but it also helps to validate others and to sort of connect people together who've had shared experiences, and just sort of like think about the empowerment a person feels when they listen to a song that describes something they've been through with like the poetic power of Phoebe Bridgers' songwriting. It's a very cathartic feeling, and just you feel like so empowered when you hear something that you can connect to, even though it's dark, even if it's sad or traumatic. It feels good. It's not a bad feeling. And I think I'm finally starting to realize that there's no shame in telling my story. And if I want to do that through songwriting, well, even better, because it's a very powerful and expressive tool to write a song. So yeah, I love that about her. And I love writers that use personal experiences in their songwriting, because while you could write about a character, you could write something that's fictional, there's something very powerful about a song that is written from a real story, from a real life perspective, and it just makes the listener feel less alone. And I think the songwriter as well. Because once it's out there and people can say, like, this, I can relate to this, I can connect to this is relatable, then it's no longer something that is shameful. And now it's like a shared experience, and it really is like a gift. So I kind of want to thank Phoebe for writing these autobiographical songs and putting them out there. That is brave. That is seriously badass. And so, kind of like the main thing I want to take from her interview is that she's not afraid to tell her story, and she does it with like bravery. She does it with like poetry, and the music is just so it's beautiful, and you can relate to it. And I think that's why she's become such an indie queen, because she did that. So if you're writing lyrics and you're writing music and you're not sure if it should be autobiographical or not because you're afraid of what people might think, I think write the song however you feels right. So if you feel like it should be from your perspective and about your true life story, then do it. It doesn't, like Phoebe said, it doesn't mean you have to share it, doesn't mean you even have to release the song, but just write the song and see how you feel, and you might feel more empowered after having written it and recorded it. And ultimately, you might actually feel not ashamed, but confident and sort of stronger after making this music that's from your life experience. Now, if you don't want to do that for whatever reason, I mean, there could be a lot of valid reasons, and that's totally cool too. If you want to write, let's say, character pieces or, fictional stories, what you can do is sort of incorporate bits of you into it. So maybe you write a story about someone similar. Maybe it's not exactly your story, or maybe it's told from someone else's perspective, but it might be about something you've been through, So I don't think you need to completely not be autobiographical, and you also don't need to fully write a song that's completely 100% about your life. It could be a combination of the two, and it's kind of like a spectrum. Like sometimes it's mostly about you, but then you mix in a little bit of fiction just for the sake of the song, for the poem, So yeah, Phoebe is an incredible and insightful young songwriter. So I really am proud of her, and I'm glad that she has released her music into the world. Even if it's dark and even if it's about trauma, I think that, like she said, it's important that we have trauma representation in art, in music, and especially as girls, as women. Phoebe is one of my songwriting inspirations because of how badass she really is, and she really does deserve all the praise and respect that she has as a musician. 100%. She rocks. If you like this video and want to see more videos of me reacting to musicians and analyzing songwriters, as well as just videos about songwriting and the creative process in general, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next week.